Most people don't realize they're trapped because nothing about the trap looks obvious. It doesn't feel like a cage. It feels like a normal life. You wake up, go to work, earn money, pay bills, maybe save a little, maybe spend a little, and then do it all over again the next day. And because everyone around you is doing the exact same thing, it never feels like something is wrong. It feels like this is just how life works. But the problem isn't that people are lazy or undisciplined or making terrible decisions every day. The problem is that the system they're operating in was never designed to create financial independence for the majority of people participating in it. It was designed for stability. It was designed for predictability. It was designed to keep things moving. And if you think about it, that makes sense. A system built on consumption and labor doesn't function well if everyone suddenly stops participating in the same way. So instead of teaching people how to escape the cycle, it teaches them how to survive inside it more comfortably. Work a little harder. Earn a little more. Upgrade your lifestyle slowly. Stay consistent. And over time, that becomes your entire financial identity. But what no one explains clearly is that this path has a built-in ceiling. Not an obvious one, not something you can see right away, but a limit that becomes more real the longer you stay on it. Because if your income depends entirely on your time, then your growth is always restricted by how much time and energy you can give. And no matter how efficient you become, no matter how skilled you become, that limit never fully disappears. It just stretches slightly. And that's why people can spend years chasing higher income, thinking they're getting closer to freedom, only to realize that the finish line keeps moving further away. Because the strategy itself doesn't remove the limitation. It just delays the moment where you feel it. And when that realization hits, it's frustrating because it feels like you did everything right. You followed the advice. You stayed consistent. You worked hard. And yet something still feels off. That feeling is awareness trying to break through. It's the moment where you start to question whether the game you're playing is actually designed for you to win, or just designed for you to keep playing. Because there's a difference between progress and motion. Motion is doing something repeatedly. Progress is moving toward a destination that actually changes your position. And a lot of people spend their entire lives in motion without ever achieving true progress. Because the direction was never adjusted. And direction is what determines everything. Once you start to see that, your perspective begins to shift in a way that's hard to reverse. You stop looking at money as something that simply comes in and goes out. And you start looking at it as something that can be positioned, directed, and multiplied. You start to realize that earning money is only one part of the equation, and by itself, it's not enough to create the kind of life most people actually want. Because earning requires effort, and effort, by definition, has limits. But systems don't operate the same way. Systems can continue. Systems can scale. Systems can grow beyond the constraints of your personal time. And that's where the real separation begins. Because once you understand that there are fundamentally different ways money can exist in your life, you stop focusing only on how to increase income, and you start focusing on how to build something that generates income. That shift is subtle, but it's powerful. It changes the questions you ask. Instead of asking how you can make more this month, you start asking how you can create something that continues producing next month without requiring the same level of effort. You start thinking in terms of leverage, in terms of positioning, in terms of long-term outcomes instead of short-term gains. And at first, this way of thinking feels unfamiliar because it doesn't produce immediate results. It doesn't give you that quick sense of progress that comes from earning more in a single moment. Instead, it asks you to think further ahead than most people are comfortable thinking. It asks you to delay gratification, to accept that the most meaningful results won't show up right away. And that's where most people stop. Not because they're incapable, but because they're impatient. because they've been conditioned to expect fast results in almost every other area of life. Quick responses, quick rewards, quick validation. But wealth doesn't follow that pattern. Wealth builds in layers, quietly, gradually, almost invisibly in the beginning. And that's what makes it so difficult for people to stick with. Because in the early stages, it feels like nothing is happening. You're making the right decisions, you're being consistent, you're doing what you're supposed to do, and yet the results don't seem to match the effort. So doubt starts to creep in. You start to question whether it's worth it, whether it's working, whether you should just go back to focusing on what feels more immediate. And that's the exact moment where most people walk away, right before the shift happens. Because what they don't see is that progress has already started, it just hasn't become visible yet. It's building beneath the surface. And once it reaches a certain point, it begins to accelerate in a way that feels almost surprising. That's the nature of compounding. It doesn't reward you in the beginning. It rewards you later for what you did in the beginning. And that delay is what separates people who stay stuck from people who eventually break out of the cycle. Because the ones who break out are willing to operate without immediate proof. They're willing to trust the process long enough for it to actually work. And once it does, everything changes. Because now, your money isn't just something you earn. It's something that begins to work. It starts contributing. It starts building on itself. And over time, it reduces the amount of effort required from you to maintain progress. That's when you start to feel a different kind of momentum. Not the kind that comes from working harder, but the kind that comes from having something in place that continues moving forward, even when you're not actively pushing it every moment. And that kind of momentum creates something most people never experience. Options. The ability to step back. The ability to choose differently. The ability to say no without everything falling apart. And that's the real goal. Not just having more money, but having more control. Control over your time. Control over your decisions. Control over the direction your life is moving in. Because without control, income alone doesn't change much. It just changes the size of your responsibilities. But when you combine income with systems, with ownership, with intentional direction, that's when things start to shift in a way that feels meaningful. That's when you move from surviving the system to operating outside of its limitations. And it doesn't happen all at once. It happens gradually, through small decisions made consistently over time, through choosing to think differently when it would be easier not to, through staying patient when everything around you is pushing for speed. And those small decisions might not feel significant in the moment. They might even feel insignificant. But over time, they compound into something that looks completely different from where you started. And eventually, you reach a point where the effort required to maintain your progress is less than it used to be, where things begin to feel lighter instead of heavier, where you're no longer relying entirely on what you can do today to sustain tomorrow. And that's when you realize that the system you once felt trapped in was never the only option. It was just the most common one. And once you see beyond it, once you understand how to operate differently, you can't unsee it. You can't go back to thinking the same way. Because now you understand that wealth isn't something that happens by accident. It's something that's built intentionally, step by step, decision by decision, over time. And if you're serious about learning how to build that kind of structure in your own life, how to actually use money in a way that creates long-term freedom instead of short-term relief, then subscribe to Smart Money Compounds, because everything here is designed to help you make that shift and stay on that path.